Thank you. 2021 is a year of hope for so many of us. We will have a new president in 19 days. Vaccine distribution is growing. We are ready to shed the anxiety and fear that have gripped us for the past 10 months and walk toward the light at the end of this tunnel. This Shabbat, we reach the end of the first book in our Torah, Bereshit, the book of Genesis. We have seen our people through so much in this book: the creation of the world, fratricide, betrayal between brothers, ruptures between human beings and God, generation after generation of family drama, finally healed by Joseph through lots of tears, as my colleague Deborah Megdal beautifully shared with us last Shabbat. This book of Bereshit, much like the year we just left behind, is marked by loss. Both Jacob and his son Joseph die in this parasha. Their final wishes have so much to teach us. Jacob, the boy who fled his household, who dreamed of the ladder, who wrestled with the angel and receives a new name, Yisrael, Israel, is on his deathbed. It is the most detailed and dignified description of death we have in our Torah. Tenderly, Jacob says to his son Joseph, "I never expected to see you again. And here, God has let me see your children as well." Jacob then blesses Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and tells Joseph, "God will be with you, will bring you back to the land of your ancestors." All of Jacob's children stand around him to receive his prophecy and blessing. And the verse tells us, when Jacob finished his instructions to his sons, he drew his feet into the bed, and breathing his last breath, he was gathered into his people. Joseph weeps over him and kisses him. He then orders the Egyptian physicians to embalm him. Of course, we all relate to death differently, but we might agree that this is an ideal death. Jacob is old, surrounded by his loved ones, gathered into his people peacefully. His body is kissed and wept over. It is unlike most deaths in our Torah, and unlike many deaths from this pandemic that have touched all of us this past year. We lost too many people who got sick before their time was up. We could not gather to say goodbye to them. We could not visit them in the hospital or their homes, the incredible mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. We were not able to move through the beautiful mourning rites in our tradition as we normally do. We could not gather in a Shiva home, bring over home-cooked food, or extend a hug. In a year marked by death around the world, it was suddenly in my chosen family. In October, my partner lost his brother in a car accident. We traveled from New York to London in time for the funeral, landing on the day of the 10th yahrzeit of my own family member. My partner's fresh grief and mine, brought back to the surface on that day, were heavy on us. Due to COVID restrictions on gathering size, I was not allowed to attend my brother-in-law's funeral. I watched via Zoom with my partner's aunt. We gathered every night for Zoom Shiva, listening to stories of his brother Zeph's life, taken suddenly and too soon. This death was far from ideal, a death very different from Jacob's. Before Jacob dies, he asks Joseph to pledge his loyalty to him and promise not to bury him in Egypt. In an end-of-life wish, he says, "V'shachafti im avotai, v'nasatani mimitzrayim, v'keraftani b'kvuratam, v'yomer anochi e'asek hidvarecha." When I lie down with my ancestors, take me up from Egypt and bury me in their burial place. Joseph replied, "I will do as you have spoken." Jacob asked Joseph to swear, which he does by bowing at the foot of his bed. What was Jacob communicating in his final request? Could he foresee that Egypt would become a place of bondage for his descendants? Ultimately, Jacob's end-of-life request is honored. After the 70 days of Egyptian mourning, Pharaoh reminds Joseph he made an oath to his father. Jacob's children, Bnei Israel, carry his body up to Canaan and bury him with his ancestors. They mourn him for 7 days. This Israelite mourning custom is the basis for our Shiva. For some people, the first encounter with grief and death is losing a grandparent or a parent. CBST member and co-chair of the Task Force on Aging, Kenneth Carpel, shared with me the difficult and meaningful process of guiding his mother Sylvia, of blessed memory, through an end-of-life conversation. Years before her death in 2007, Kenneth noticed the cloak of invincibility was beginning to shred. He knew the conversation was important and that she was open to it. At Kenneth's request, he and his mother Sylvia had a conversation about the 5 wishes, an outline of end-of-life decisions, over dinner at her apartment in Riverdale. Kenneth described the rawness and emotion behind the decisions he had to make as her condition worsened years later. He said that having her completed the 5 wishes was one of the few guideposts he had in an unknown territory. She wished to die at home in her apartment, and Kenneth was able to make that happen for her. Sylvia's end-of-life wishes were honored, a mitzvah of love from her son. Seeing our parents' deaths can clarify what we want for our own end. In the Parsha, we see Joseph, who carried out his father's final wishes with care, reach his own time. At the age of 110, Joseph turns to his brothers and says, "I am about to die. God will surely take notice of you and bring you up from this land, to the land that God promised on oath to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." Joseph makes a similar instruction to Jacob, asking the sons of Israel to swear their loyalty, then says, "Pakod yifkod Elohim etchem, v'helitem et atzmotai mizeh." When God has really taken notice of you, you shall carry up my bones from here. Why does Joseph want his bones moved? In the Midrash Mechilta de Rabbi Ishmael, we learn the memory of the location of Joseph's bones is crucial to the exodus from Egypt. Jewish legend holds that the Egyptians hid Joseph's coffin so the Israelites would never be able to find it, and thus would never be able to leave. Only one descendant of Jacob remembers where Joseph's coffin is: his niece, CRRI bat Asher, the daughter of Asher. CRRI is a mysterious figure in our Torah. She is only one of 3 women mentioned in the entire Torah who has no husband or children. But our sages bring her to life in the Midrash, like the benevolent witch in fairy tales. It is said she was blessed by Jacob with impossibly long life because it was she who first told Jacob that Joseph was alive. Sarah was said to be 400 years old when the Israelites were making their harried escape from Egypt. Only Sarah could help Moses fulfill the promise of his ancestors to take up Joseph's bones from Egypt. In the Midrash, Sarah says to Moses, "The Egyptians put him in a small metal coffin, which they sunk in the Nile." So Moses went and stood by the Nile. He took a tablet of gold on which he engraved the letters Yud, He, Vav, He, that ineffable name for God, and threw it into the Nile. He cried out and said, "Joseph, son of Jacob, the oath to redeem his children, which God swore to our father Abraham, has reached its fulfillment." Immediately, Joseph's coffin came up to the surface, and Moses took the bones. I'm brought back to this beautiful image of Yocheved, Moses' mother, placing him as a baby into the Nile so that he might live, and the daughter of Pharaoh who reaches out her hand and rescues him, despite knowing he is an Israelite. These brave women went to the Nile to give Moses a chance at life. And in this Midrash, Moses throws something into the Nile again, with the hope of bringing a piece of Joseph's life on the journey toward freedom. In Hebrew, the word for bones is atzamot, but in an unvocalized Torah without vowels, we can also read the word atzmut, essence. We say in our daily speech, "I can feel it in my bones." We see it in our liturgy too. We recite my favorite line, the 10th line of Psalm 35 every Shabbat. Kol atzmotai tomarna, Adonai mi kamocha. All my bones shall say, "God, who is like you?" I think of this line every time I'm dancing or hiking in a beautiful place. The reverence and beauty in my bones that make me feel small in the presence of something holy. What is the significance of this return of Jacob's body and Joseph's bones to the land of Israel? They are about memory. CRRI preserved the knowledge of where Joseph's bones lay. Without her, the people could not have remembered, and no redemption could have taken place. Taking up Joseph's bones is a liberation of his essence, his atzmut, and his bones, his atzamot, from the bondage of Egypt. By insisting that his bones be taken up when his people leave for the land of Israel, Joseph asks them to remember their identity, trust in their liberation, and that he be written the story with them one day. Only by remembering can they be free. Over the past few months, CBST has been earnestly and thoughtfully engaging in what matters conversations, caring conversations about advanced care planning for future healthcare decisions. These are compassionate, value-driven conversations that require us to ask, what is a good life? What do I want at the end of my life? What are my advanced directives, and how do I appoint a healthcare agent? Approaching these questions is, of course, vulnerable, as these conversations are kept under the rug in our society, and there's a lot of fear around them. Formulating our healthcare wishes requires us to face our mortality, an ongoing and lifelong task. It also gives us an opportunity to reflect on what is important to us, to take stock of what life means and what our values are. When I asked Kenneth what it meant to have these conversations in community, he took me back 10 years into CBST's history, telling me about the deep conversations and deep relationships he formed in the synagogue that allowed these difficult, urgent, and personal topics like aging and death to be explored in the first place. Kenneth shared the gratitude he feels, saying these conversations are part of the sacred fabric of our community. I am in awe of the work that CBST staff and lay leaders facilitating these conversations are doing. Thank you. More than that, I'm proud to be a part of a community that is built on trust, connection, and commitment to one another that allows these vulnerable conversations to happen at all. One might think that Parshat Vayechi, meaning, and he lived, will be about Jacob or Joseph's life. Jacob and Joseph teach us about life by showing us what it looks like to die well. They show us what communicating their wishes to a trusted person looks like and how to ensure their wishes are respected. And indeed, for both of them, they are. Kenneth said the impact of these conversations ripples beyond the immediate family or loved ones to those we don't even know yet. End-of-life wishes can give a blueprint for how we want to be remembered. Joseph and Jacob include the people of Israel, their descendants that they will never meet, in their end-of-life wishes and blessings, instilling their memory and the hope in God to reach the promised land in their descendants. As we enter 2021, let us lean on the incredible strength of our CBST community to think about what matters to us, about how we want to live, and in communicating that with clarity, that we enter this year of hope more free and more light. May these conversations, which are clear in our Torah and Joseph and Jacob's beautiful ends of their lives, continue to be a part of the sacred fabric of our community. Shabbat Shalom.